Joe Thomas, Pro Football Hall of Famer, Browns legend, celebrated Meat Man worldwide. He had a great video about why a veteran coach would make more sense. Now, we are on head coach watch. It could happen. These things tend to happen. Browns usually make these decisions in the morning. A lot of this stuff, whether it be guys getting cut, guys getting fired, guys getting hired, they usually happen in the morning with the Browns. So keep it here, 923thefan.com, 923thefan. I'm obviously on the regular radio, on YouTube Live, free Odyssey app, the whole thing. Keep it here because it could happen at any time. Once it happens at any time, obviously these interviews change. If it happens before 8 o'clock, then, the whole question with Aditi is, what's this guy going to do, whether it be Jim Schwartz, whether it be Nate Scheelhaus or Todd Monken, who's still out there, Anthony Lynn, who's still out there. What happens there if one of these guys are hired? Same thing with Joe. Joe, I think it's going to be an interesting perspective if they were to hire Nate Scheelhaus. Okay, what does he have to do to endear himself to Myles Garrett? What's he have to do to ingratiate himself within these players to make sure that he's the type of guy that he can start off on the right foot with these guys? That's, I think, going to be a very, very, very big thing. And obviously, we're paying attention to a lot of other things. LeBron's back in town with the Lakers playing the Cavs tonight. Evan Mobley's going to be out, and he's going to be out for a few weeks. That's coming up in about last night. Hell of a lot of stuff going on, guys. Hell of a lot of things going on. 216-474-0092. So who would you trust with you? Would you trust Jimmy or Andrew? I know it's tough because it's like you and I, you speak out of both sides of our mouths. You said Jim yesterday. I said Jim yesterday. It's like, okay, comfort. He's been a head coach before, but it does feel like you're hiring a bridge head coach, quote unquote. We would both say, all right, I guess I give the edge to Jim. Defense already loves him. Myles loves him.
Well, and listen.
You're closer to halfway. You feel like you're closer to halfway there with him, but it's like, well, you have Andrew Berry here for a reason. Why wouldn't you?
I know we all hear a lot of things about what could be happening behind the scenes, and a lot of it I just flush away. Even some of the stuff I've heard, I flush away because
what have you heard?
Well, there's just ulterior motives of people trying to get messaging out. But I can tell you just flat out, and I don't think this is any big reach, and it's the most logical conclusion. Guys like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, they love Jim Schwartz. Yeah. They love him. Yeah. Now, you'd say, do they just love him as defensive coordinator? That might be the case, but that's what they know right now, and they have been out there, and I told you yesterday how, hey, I know it rubs some people the wrong way when they're out doing, choreographed dance routines on a losing football team, but it's because they have an identity. They believe in themselves. It's everything we'd love to see out of the offense, but we can't get there for myriad reasons. Mm-hmm. They do appreciate Jim Schwartz as a head coach, and it would not shock me if the things I've heard are true, which is they have gone to bat for Jim Schwartz to be the head coach. And that has been something that nobody seems to care about, but I think you should, because Myles Garrett's one of the leaders of the team, and Denzel Ward is one of the leaders of the team. In a team where there's not a lot of leadership, or we've asked where the leadership is coming from, those guys are leaders, and when Jimmy Haslam picks their brains, would not shock me if what I've heard is true, that they would do anything for Jim Schwartz.
Now, what's his leadership style like defensively? I'm going to get to the phones here in a second, I promise. I want to ask, what do you think his leadership style is like defensively? Because there's a big difference in going from an assistant to being a head coach. Like
Josh McDaniels.
Like if they were to take Bill Callahan has always been, this is the way it is and this is the way it's going to be. And I think that Bill Callahan, listen, I know it didn't work out in Nebraska and all the other stuff, and it fizzles out of her. The guy did coach in a Super Bowl, for crying out loud, okay? Like, he was good. He was a good football coach. He's been a good football coach a long time.
Oh, yeah.
He's had that managerial type of feeling with the offensive line, and then he had the managerial type of feeling with the head coach. I don't question whether or not he would be able to step into that role. Just using him as an example. Jim, well, we're celebrating every play. That's a loaf. We're excited. We play exciting. Will that translate to being a head coach? Is it? I can't imagine a guy who's 60 years old who's been doing this long is all hunky-dory, buddy, and then getting a head coaching look. I don't think that would happen. But you have to pay attention to such a thing like that because we see it all the time. Guys go from assistant to head coach, and then all of a sudden they have to be different than what they've been before. That's why 9 times out of 10, you really want guys to go to a different area. You want guys to go to a different team because then they can change. They can be different. Hey, it was that way with the Rams. It's this way with the Browns. I have to change myself because I have to be an overseer of everything. You can still be true to who you are, but you can't have that type of relationship like you've had in the past. See, that would be one of the things I'd have to ask Jim Schwartz in an interview. And we brought this up before, but that's just one of the things I think
I'm curious how relative his time in Detroit was as a head coach to the Browns fans in all of this, because I think it's probably.
I think it becomes more and more as they get more excited about the younger people.
But I wonder, I bet you somebody like Jimmy Haslam is honestly trying to think logically about this. Like, you got to remember where Detroit was before Jim Schwartz was there. They had been decade plus
0-16, bad drafting.
How many years in between playoff bursts? It was a ton.
It was Barry Sanders.
And so they go to the playoffs. They had a little bit of success, not all that different from what Kevin Stefanski was able to pull off here. And yet it went down with a lot of the normal fans, and obviously in Detroit, I'm sure at the end, he's a failed head coach. But it was so long ago, and Albert Breer has brought this up on a bunch of interviews, a bunch of podcasts. He's like, yeah, they went and drafted a bunch of just unsavory characters. Does it sound familiar with what may have happened in Cleveland over time? But they drafted a bunch of guys that were not even on draft boards for other teams because of all the warning flags, and then it flamed out immediately. It just went nowhere. Is he not allowed to learn from those circumstances and everything? And some of that probably out of his control too. Is he allowed to learn from that? It's been so long. The guy is okay. Guys change. Guys evolve over time. And in a hiring cycle where we just saw John Harbaugh, Mike McCarthy get hired, why is it that crazy that Jim Schwartz, who the Detroit Lions, I think young fans today don't have any clue what a laughing stock Detroit was.
No, they just see how
they were the Browns. They were today's Browns. Not even today's Browns. They were the 1-31 Browns. Mm-hmm. That's what they were before Jim Schwartz went there. So it would not surprise me if he doesn't get dinged in that Browns building, especially because they've worked with him.
Yeah.
They haven't seen a failed head coach like Jim Schwartz's reputation of a failed head coach. They don't see that because they work with him every day, and he's been so successful with their unit. They probably are, if anything, they're probably that couldn't have been Jim Schwartz's fault when he failed in Detroit.
Well, if you're considering him for the head coach, you are trying to tell yourself that it's not his fault. Now, what is true and what is not true, you're going to see it in a different discipline. Now that he's a finalist, we're down to the nitty gritty. Yeah, I don't think that's really going to be such a big ding on him anymore. Frankie in Columbus, you're first up on the Fan. Hello, Frankie.
Great Wednesday morning, gentlemen. How are we?
Hey, we're well. Go ahead.
All righty, I got some thoughts you're probably not going to like, but Jim Schwartz, to me, that hire gives me the same feeling of when the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce. I just don't think it's serious. And first of all, I don't think this coaching search is serious, but I just don't think it's a serious hire because what is your expectation when you hire him? You're not expecting to win, and I think if you hire
Why do you say that? Why do you think that when, Antonio Pierce was a totally different situation because he had just been an assistant for a couple of years or a player coach. Jim Schwartz has been a head coach. He's been a Super Bowl winning coordinator. What's unserious about that? Super Bowl winning coordinators get head coaching jobs. That's what happens.
I hear you. I hear you on that. But the reason I see the parallels is the players got excited under Antonio Pierce. Max Crosby was like, I'm not staying unless he's staying. And then you're getting that same vibe from obviously Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. But so standing by their guy, and that's all a good sign. But why is nobody else interviewing him?
Well, he was. He did get one interview.
Where?
Baltimore.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. So thank you for correcting me on that. I still don't think it's a good hire, though. I would go Shieldhouse, but I would only go Shieldhouse if you're okay with it taking some time. Because I got to tell you, I think the Browns got to just destroy everything and just start from square one. I just think they are paying so much money. They're fifth to last in cap space right now. And I mean, you're spending way too much money to be this bad.
Frankie, you're right, but you're still forced to spend it. I don't know if you're going to get that for another year. That's why I think that's why you and a lot of people, and thank you for the call, I think you and a lot of people have the same feeling, is that if you do hire Nate, Shieldhouse is like, man, it's going to be really, really hard to move on from him after 1 year. Even though, Limey, you've brought up disaster scenarios, and I can't say it's completely impossible. But if you hire Jim Schwartz, like, yeah, the term bridge head coach is going to be brought up. There's no doubt about that. I can't fight that. That's something that we are going to have to discuss all throughout the offseason and going into next year.